Hello, and welcome to another installment of Mondays with Meaning. This is Angela Ward. I'm a registered nurse, transformational coach, and CEO of Guardian at the Gateway. I am talking with you today and this week about grief and anxiety, as well as some techniques to help navigate the waters over the next few weeks. This is being streamed on YouTube, but also live in the Unveiled Vitality Facebook group. So please make sure that you give StreamYard permission to show you. And I see that Shelly just came on. Yay, happy to see you. So please, if you're watching live, leave me some hearts, emojis, leave little comments. I will try to respond to them live as we can. And if you're watching a replay, please just put replay in the comments so that I know you checked it out. It's really helpful when you respond to these because then I know if I'm serving you, if I'm helping you with the content that I'm creating for you. And if you'd like to see something different, feel free to let me know. I'd love your suggestions, and I want to make it all just for you. What do I want to start with? I was reviewing some things that I've made in the past, and I realized I had talked about grief cycles at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. It was just in the middle of April, perhaps. And the reason I want to discuss grief right now is for a number of reasons, grief and anxiety. So we are facing our national election tomorrow, November 3rd. The political scene in our country has increased the stress level tremendously of people in our culture, while simultaneously the numbers of COVID cases are increasing throughout our country and worldwide. So it's more and more complicated. Are you feeling any of this? I wonder. So I'm a nurse, as I've mentioned before, and the way that I approach these things is from my nursing perspective. So as a nurse, I pulled out my trusty nursing diagnosis handbook. Any of you that are nurses have probably seen this and said, I'll never use that damn thing ever again. But guess what? Oh, here comes Roxy. She's like, I want to go outside, but you're here for the whole show, so sit on the ground, girl. I think there's some good things to look at here. The theory, of course, in nursing practices to support people on their own healing journey rather than being super prescriptive and saying that, you need the drugs or you need this or that. But I thought it would be nice to kind of look in here and just kind of see technically what is it? How do we define grief and anxiety? To me, it's helpful to understand some of the defining characteristics. And I also feel like I have a level of authority here to speak about grief because not only as a nurse have I been with people as they've passed away, but I've also experienced a significant amount of loss in my life. As a young person, I had a number of family members die before I was mid-20s. Pretty regularly, which was very challenging. And then I'm also a bereaved parent. So my child passed away when she was young. Some of you may know that or not. I'm also a specialist in perinatal bereavement. So I've worked a lot with families whose babies are going to be born still or can't live for some reason after birth, and also run a number of support groups. I've worked with adults at the end of their life that are moving into hospice care, that are struggling with cancer and other health conditions like that. So this has been a close path for me in a lot of ways. And it's a challenging place, and yet there's a lot of beauty in grief. A lot can move in grief. So let's untangle these a little bit. What exactly is grief? It is a normal, complex process that includes emotional, physical, spiritual, social, and intellectual responses and behaviors by individuals, families, and communities that incorporate an actual anticipated or perceived loss into their daily lives. Does that ring a bell with anyone? We have been living in this place of loss for a couple months, for some time now. I forgot to add on the climate crisis, which I think is adding this extra piece of grief on top of it. So it may be something that you're feeling is not so overt yet. I suspect it's true. And once this election has been decided, there are going to be people that are grieving the outcome in a big way. And regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, it is going to be a process that we go through and that we need to support one another through. So, just some defining characteristics, what you might see when one is grieving would be alterations in activity levels. So maybe it's harder to get out of bed, harder to move around, harder to get functioning. Alterations in dream patterns. I don't know about you, but man, I have been dreaming so much lately of being in crowds or being at events with tons of people around. Isn't that crazy? Yeah, and kind of being like, oh yeah, remember when I couldn't hang out with people up close, like traveling and being at like the beach with a whole bunch of people around? Does that count? I kind of think it does. Alterations in immune function. This is really important to understand that when one is grieving, you are more susceptible to illness. Absolutely true. Alterations in neuroendocrine functioning. So your hormones, alterations in sleep patterns, anger, blaming, despair, detachment, disorganization, distress. These are all some things that can be experienced when one is moving through this grief process. Anticipatory grieving is part of this. So I've talked with a number of people over the last couple of weeks that are really feeling this level of dread, feeling uncertain of how to function over the next upcoming weeks. Also, just bummed out that we can't connect together the way that we have in the past. Feeling this real sense of loss, and that in many ways things are just never going to be the same again. And I would think that is true to some degree. We are living in a challenging time. Very challenging time. So that's one part. We're talking about grief, but now let's talk a little bit about anxiety. Also very common, but anxiety manifests in a lot more areas. So the definition of anxiety is a vague, uneasy feeling of discomfort or dread, accompanied by an autonomic response. The source is often non-specific or unknown to the individual. The autonomic response might be your heart is racing or you feel short of breath. Hi, Felicia. Thanks for joining. So good to see you. I'm reading the nursing diagnosis handbook, so another definition of anxiety is a feeling of apprehension caused by an anticipation of danger. I would say there's a lot of that happening. I'd like to share a little story of that. My sister was recently in a little, she went to get coffee with her partner, driving through Starbucks, had their masks on. And when they pulled out of the Starbucks, they still had their masks on because they had them on to talk to the server through the window. And someone sped up to them, rolled his window down, and started coughing on them, like on purpose. Like, wow. So the anticipation of danger, like there is some legitimate concern out there. There is some level of unsafety So that's a real thing. Anxiety is an alerting sign that warns of impending danger and enables the individual to take measures to deal with the threat. So I think that's really important to remember, that it's a warning sign and it enables us to take measures to deal with the threat. It's tough because it's kind of vague, right? We're not 100% certain what may happen, what is truly the problem that we are, how might we respond to this anxiety? There's a lot of different characteristics that are normal. There's decreases in productivity, fidgeting, hypervigilance, insomnia, poor eye contact, anguish, apprehensiveness, uncertainty, rattled, facial tension, hand tremors, perspiration, uh, alterations in respiratory patterns, difficulties eating, um, abnormal pain. Anxiety can absolutely increase our pain levels. The way that it really shows up for me is cognition, alteration in attention, in concentration, in awareness of physiologic symptoms, blocking of different thoughts, confusions, a diminished ability to learn or problem solve, forgetfulness. These are some of my nursing diagnoses for what's happening in our community and society right now. And so I'm wondering some of our ways that we can work with this experience. I'm certainly not suggesting that we avoid feeling grief or we avoid feeling anxiety, but rather to meet this feeling, these feelings. These are emotions and they need to be felt. They will persist until they are experienced. So the question is, how do we engage with them in a loving, gentle, careful way that allows us to process these experiences without harming ourselves? Anxiety is an easier one to start with, I believe, because oftentimes it seems like grief can be a well that people, once they start circling it, are afraid they're going to get overwhelmed and kind of plummet into the depths of grief. Anxiety tends to be a bit more of an energy, similar to excitement. Anyone that's ever worked with me has heard me say that excitement is energy. Wait, anxiety is excitement without the breath, or that anxiety and energy are very similarly experienced in the body, but our interpretation of them is quite different. The way that I like to meet anxiety is to engage with that more up energy, to maybe move in some shaking or bouncing or swinging ways that kind of let the energy run through the body, really allowing it to be felt and experienced, and kind of getting out of here and running it through our body so that we can process it. That's one method. Another method of meeting anxiety is alternate nostril breathing, which I've taught before in some of these groups. So I will certainly do another little video and walk us through it. It's super simple, but that does bring us to the present moment. It helps balance the hemispheres of the brain. I will be dropping in some little techniques through the week to help meet anxiety and grief, these feelings that might become overwhelming, to kind of settle into this moment. Other feelings with anxiety, my husband likes to play the spectrum game. That's what he calls it, where we kind of follow the anxiety to its most extreme meaning. What happens if this bad thing happens? And pretty much if you follow that thread, every time it ends up as I'm going to die alone and in pain. It's kind of, sorry to say it like that, but that's kind of what happens. I'm going to die alone and in pain. But what if the opposite were true? What if we explored the depths of how terrible it could be, but what if we explored the possibility of ways it could go in a different direction? And all that does for me when I do this is it allows me to, first of all, go down that path in a safe container. Let's follow the poop stream of how shitty it can get. But then also, what happens if the opposite were true? And allowing for the possibilities for all of those to exist, because we can't know what's going to happen until we're in it. Now, grief Grief is a bit of a different story. Grief is safe. First of all, I just want you to know that grief is safe. It's okay to feel. It's not a comfortable feeling. It doesn't generally make us feel good. It can feel very painful, but there's nothing wrong with letting yourself feel it. In fact, I find that the struggle comes more from resisting it. And how might we meet anticipatory grief today, through the election, through the next week or so? How might we support others that are going through these grief experiences? So first of all, I think it's important to acknowledge that that's a feeling that many of us are having, especially the anticipatory grief, that we're anticipating the loss of even more. Or, yeah, we're laying some things to rest in a way that they have not in the past. And again, at the end of the election, some of us are going to be grieving and some of us are going to be celebrating. And rather than let me put this another way. We are not going to be able to heal our society if we keep dividing ourselves. We've got to build bridges. And in the results of this election, I would hope that whatever the outcome, that the winners find ways to build bridges to the losers. You know, rather than being like, well, screw you, see, we were right the whole time, or, you know, fuck that guy. You know, it's okay to think that for a moment, but let's like not shit on our fellow citizens about this. They're going to be grieving. People are going to be grieving, and they're going to be full of a lot of fear and anxiety. So we can model this opportunity to settle and acknowledge what's happening. So how to feel grief? Ooh, that's a tricky one. I think absolutely making space for it is crucial. So allowing ourselves to understand what the feeling of grief is and what exactly we might be grieving the loss of. That may require that you take a little private time and maybe do a little journaling or talking with some of your beloveds, or in the group. If you're in the Unveiled Vitality group, this is a safe place for us to talk about some fear of loss and grieving. Giving yourself that space, safe space to feel it and cry. Oh my Lord, cry, my little ones. We need to let this energy move. Again, it's an emotion that needs to move. Another fun thing to experience grieving is to get on those sad songs. I had an experience this last week where I'm in this other group where we're playing with some witchy poo magic stuff, and we were just working with the element of air, which had air has a lot of joy and buoyancy in it, but for some reason I was just feeling battered and sad. I see a new Facebook user is here. Please give StreamYard permission to allow you to see, for me to see you, because I just see Facebook user. Hello, beautiful. I don't know who you are. Hi. But back to that. So this air, I was feeling just bonked around like storms. And all of a sudden, as I was playing with that feeling of the storm, the song Stormy Weather came into my mind. Don't know why there's no sun up in the sky, stormy weather. I'm telling you, friends, I pulled that song out of nowhere. I don't know where that song came from. I used to know all the words to it, but I have certainly not sung it for a long time. But there was something about just immersing myself in the sadness of stormy weather that like shifted everything. It allowed me to be with that feeling and metabolized it in a way that then, yes, so good. It definitely brought some buoyancy back. So maybe there's a way you can allow yourself to settle into this grief, or if you have pictures of beloved, you can spend a little time with that. Or if there's certain things about the way life has been that you're grieving, really allow yourself to witness it and allow yourself to feel that grief. Another technique to allow grief to occur, I have a dear friend that he and I used to hang out a lot and watch what we would call grief porn, meaning we would try to bring movies to one another that would make one of us cry. Yeah, it's ridiculous. But we would put on one movie. Let's say he brought a movie for me, he'd sit and then he'd watch me while I watched the movie to see when I was going to cry, or if I was playing one, I'd be watching him like, oh, is this going to be the part that gets him? It's so ridiculous. But there's something very cathartic about allowing that experience to move through, knowing that it's safe and creating a container for it. It's Julie. Hi, Julie. Yay. I'm so happy you're here. Yeah, I hope that's helpful. I'm going to be posting regularly through the week in the group, as I do, some suggestions. I think I have a really sweet, sweet song to post for you tomorrow that some of you might know that, it's just got this one part that, like, every time I hear it, it just like, breaks open that grief. It has this like build of longing, and then it's just like, maybe that's another thing too, is that grief is kind of hard to access logically, I think. I do. I think we can certainly make these lists and connect to it, but at the same time, it's more embodied somehow. Some films I would recommend. If you haven't seen the story of the Weeping Camel, that is a sweet story. It's kind of about grief. This camel needs to cry in order for her to soften. Another film I would very much recommend, I send to all my folks. I highly recommend a film called Griefwalker by Stephen Jenkinson. You can watch it on the Film Board of Canada. And he's essentially a death doula, and he talks about dying, death and dying. I think it's good to keep that piece of humanity in mind as we move through this upcoming week. So there we have it. Is there any questions? Felicia, I see you asking me to send you the link to the Witchy Poo Magic group. I certainly will do that. It's almost complete, but I'm sure they will do it again. And yeah, let's build some bridges. Let's hold each other through this time. Let's allow the anxiety and grief to be present. Remember, some of you may have watched the Resilient Wellness Workshop last week, and I mentioned a product called LAVELA, which is a lavender oil that has been clinically shown to be as effective as lorazepam in trials around anxiety, and it's available. I can put a link in the notes if you're interested. I have a full script account. You can buy it at a discount from me, or you might be able to track it down in other places, but that's also very helpful. I'd love to hear your ideas of ways to meet anxiety and grief this week, friends. Your inspiration, your challenges, your self-care plan for the next couple of days. What are we going to do? If you're watching this on another platform, please come into the Unveiled Vitality Facebook group, because we really are supporting each other in there. And I'm just so grateful to have the crew there that are there right now. Bring your friends, everybody. We can make this a safe, vibrant space to have more positivity, to be more real, to be less divisive, to build more bridges, to get creative. I really want to find ways for us to love on each other right now. All right. Blessings to all of you. I will post that stuff shortly, and I hope you have a beautiful day. You're doing something to really help your body feel great. All right. Love you all. Bye.